ControlLogic's Maintainer Certificate, Chapter 16, Analyzing and Troubleshooting a System Using a Studio 5000 Logix Designer Trend Chart. Our objective is to configure and operate a trend chart. In this tutorial, we'll be creating two double integer tags with some code to arbitrarily change their value over time, and then a trend to help us visualize the change in that data. Before we begin, let's define what a trend is. A trend chart is a graphical display that tracks digital and analog data over a user-specified time period. The Trends folder is located in the controller organizer, and a project may contain and execute multiple trend charts. So I'm going to create a trend that has two pens. The pens are going to draw whatever data I choose to assign to the pens. So the first thing I have to do is create some tags that has data that I want to display. Let's go into controller tags and make two tags. Easy enough. MyDent1 and MyDent2. Now that I've created my tags, I'm just going to create some logic to change the value of those tags arbitrarily. Let me go into main routine and add a rung. All this rung of logic does is add 1 to MyDent1 every scan. Once the value of MyDent1 reaches or exceeds 1,000, I clear it. I'm going to duplicate this logic for MyDent2. And just to make the dents have different values, rather than adding 1 to MyDent2, I'm going to add something different. Let's say 4. Now that I've created my logic, I'm going to download to my emulated processor. I'm going to go to Communications and Who Active, select my emulated processor in slot 2, and download. When asked if I'd like to re-enter remote run mode, I'm going to select yes, and then we'll be able to witness the values of these double integers changing. We can see that there are different values at different times because I'm changing them at different rates. That'll be useful when we go to view them on the trend. To create a new trend, we go to our controller organizer and navigate down to Trends. We can right-click on this and create a new trend. We'll name our trend, and we'll select how often we want the trend to sample the data. In this case, we'll choose the default value of 10 milliseconds. The scope of our trend can be program-based or controller-based. I'm going to leave it on controller scoped. And it'll give us the option to select tags to add. I'm going to select both MyDent1, click Add. We can see that it shows up in the tags to trend. And MyDent2, Add, and Finish. Up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, we can see that the color for MyDent1 defaulted to blue, and MyDent2 defaulted to green. But my trend isn't displaying any data. What's going on? Well, we have to go up here and actually run our trend. Let's click Run. We can see that the status changed from stopped to logging, and we're seeing some blue and green lines that represent the value of MyDent1 and MyDent2. In its present state, I'm not extremely happy with how it's scaling on the screen. Let's see if we can change that around until we're satisfied with it. In order to change the trend properties, we go over to our controller organizer and trends, and the trend that we're referring to, right-click and go to Properties. We'll see several tabs along the top, including the name, General Properties, Display Elements, Pens, X-axis, Y-axis, etc. Well, for right now, let's make the first thing we change the color of the pens, just so we can see what's happening. I don't really like this blue, just because it's a little bit difficult to see against the black background. Let's change that to red. And this is red enough. OK, and apply. Now we can see that my Dent 1 is currently represented by a red line instead of a blue line. Something else I might want to change on my trend is the scaling. Right now I'm happy with the sample rate, that is how often I collect data, but the data seems to be moving by a little quick for my taste. Let's go back to the controller organizer, Trends, and go to Properties of my trend. I'm going to go to the X-axis, which is my time axis, and I see that the time span allows 2 seconds worth of data to be on the trend at once. I'm going to change that to 10 seconds and click Apply. I'm still collecting data as often, but I'm displaying more of it on the screen at once. I can also go to my Y-axis, which is the span of the values displayed on the trend. Right now it's set up for automatic, which means it'll default to best fit. I'm going to change that to custom. Change it to just some different values. Let's say that I want my negative value that's displayed to be negative 1,000, that's the minimum value, and the maximum value to be 2,000. I'm going to click Apply, and we see that it scales that data according to these minimum and maximum values. Another important trend property is the sample period. The sample period is the frequency at which the trend is updated. Let's go to My Trend Properties and check out the Sampling tab. We can see that we can't adjust the sample period while the trend is running. So let's stop and go back. The sample period is currently set at 10 milliseconds. Let's see what happens if we change that to 250 milliseconds and click Apply. Well, it looks like it's complaining at me that the number of samples is currently too large. So let's change that to be within the range it asks for. And run. You see this stair-step pattern. What's causing that? Well, you might remember that we decreased the frequency, that is, increased the period of the sample time. That means that we're waiting a little bit longer between updating the samples, and that means our resolution is coarser. We're seeing anomalies on this graph because we're not taking data rapidly enough. If our data doesn't change very often, we might choose a long sampling period or a slow refresh rate for our data in order to have more points to deal with. If we're dealing with a value that only changes twice a day, it might not be useful to update that every 100 milliseconds, every 10 milliseconds. But if we're looking at a rapidly changing value, decreasing the sampling period will allow us to see more accurately what's going on over time.